Aloha, YouTube friends! You probably don't know, but Mrs. Tiki Envy is a 4th grade teacher in our home state of California. Part of her curriculum each year is to study the history of California and the California missions. In the summer of 2024, we went on a road trip and visited each of California's 21 missions, plus Fort Ross. We learned about the native peoples, the Spanish soldiers, and Father Junipero Serra and his priests. In between, we stayed at some of our favorite campsites, and we enjoyed a few tiki bars. We called it our Priests and Pagans tour. We hope you enjoy this video remembrance of our journey. Mission San Antonio. Kind of in the building right there that I just was looking at, but Mission San Antonio de Padua, a mission of the Sierras, was the 3rd mission established on July 14th, 1771 by Father Serra. The least visited mission, she told us when we got here. You can see why. It's in the middle of nowhere, this mission. In 1773, the mission was moved to a spot further up the Los Robles Valley where it now stands because of an unreliable water source at its original location. Mission San Antonio is the site of the first marriage recorded in California in 1773. The bride in California's first wedding was a Native American from the Salinan tribe. The Salinan and Aselan natives occupied this part of the San Joaquin Valley for thousands of years before any Spanish arrived. The mission sits at the westernmost of a series of volcanic peaks known as the Nine Sisters. Juan Cabrillo, one of the earliest European explorers, recorded in his ship's log in 1542 that he was met by native peoples paddling grass tule rafts made by the Salinans. By 1805, there were 1,300 neophytes living and working at the mission, and this painting beautifully depicts the 3 cultures that were then housed here: the Native Americans, the priests, and the Spanish soldiers. During the Spanish colonial period, Spain not only wanted to establish its own colonies, but also wanted to keep Russia from doing the same. Missions were built around quadrangles like this to make them more defensible. Soldiers were stationed at Mission San Antonio between 1771 and 1830. They were veteran frontiersmen, many having originally been recruited to accompany the Spanish priests through Baja California. Some were the offspring of mixed marriages, and many also married Native American women. The first marriage in California, which was just mentioned, was between Juan Maria Ruiz, one of the Soldado de Cuera, and Margarita de Corona, a native Salinan. Margarita was her baptized name after she graduated as a member of the mission's first baptism class in 1773. Of course, baptizing Native Americans and converting them to Catholicism was the main goal of the church and the Catholic priests. San Antonio de Padua. Construction of the church did not begin until 1810, but it was the first to use a red tile roof, which was both fireproof and waterproof. Saint Anthony of Padua is a patron saint of the mission and is at the center of the altar. Saint Anthony of Padua was from the order of Franciscan priests. He was known for his powerful sermons, thorough knowledge of Scripture, and an unwavering devotion to the poor and sick. He was canonized less than a year after his death in 1231 AD. All the statues on the altar are original to the mission. They are, left to right, Saint Bonaventura, Saint Michael Archangel, and Saint Francis of Assisi. On the left wall is a side altar to Mary. And on the right wall is a side altar to Saint Jose. San Antonio de Padua features an extensive collection of sheet music and antique musical instruments. The mission had its own orchestra, and some members even made their own instruments out of native California wood.
Welcome to the music room in the museum at Mission San Antonio de Padua. The music you've been hearing is the old El Cantico del Alba, the hymn of dawn that was sung by the mission families upon rising in the morning.
The great hand, which we just saw, is called a Guidonian hand. The concept, created in the 10th century, was to have people memorize pitches and positions on their hand. The teacher would then teach songs by pointing to different positions and have the singers sing the corresponding pitches. Padre Juan Bautista Sancho used this technique at the mission, and staves like this one helped him to teach the native singers Christian hymns. Neophytes did play and sing, but most of their time was spent tending to the mission's buildings, its livestock and crops, and the daily needs of its people, like here in the kitchen. In addition to domestic rooms like the kitchen, the mission also had a water-powered gristmill, a tannery, a weaving room, an iron shop, a carpenter's shop, a tile shop, and of course, it also had a stable. Mission San Miguel de Padua has the most complete mission-era water system in all of California. Much of that water was used to irrigate the mission's vineyard, which may have been the very first in California.
So all that wine industry in California all started here with the missions. We're actually upstairs in this room for this wine vat. You can imagine the wine coming down. They would use it for services. And here we are, down where that wine is aged. Ooh. And it's a lot cooler down here too.
Wine was used both in church and in the priest's private chapel. Neophytes would have served the priests in rooms like this one. The neophytes would have used pottery and perhaps even fine china like this. The once thriving mission was not to survive, however. By 1810, the number of neophytes was down from around 1,300 to only 178. After secularization in 1834, only 150 neophytes were left. In 1845, the mission was put up for sale by Governor Pio Pico, but no one bid for it. In 1863, after being abandoned for 30 years, the mission was returned to the Catholic Church and eventually restored by the Hearst Corporation. In 1928, Franciscan friars once again held services at the mission. No town ever grew up around Mission San Antonio, and it is the least visited of all the California missions due to its isolation. Mission San Antonio de Padua, a beautiful place rich with California history. Mission San Antonio is on the Fort Hunter Leggett Army Base and is surrounded by 86 acres of what used to be the Hearst Ranch. As such, getting to it and then back again takes some doing, but the drive allowed us to see this herd of California elk. When we arrived at our next mission in Soledad, it was lunchtime, and we enjoyed another picnic before touring the mission. Despite the statue of Father Serra outside, Mission Nuestra Señora de la Soledad was founded October 9, 1791, by Father Fermin Francisco de Lausen. The mission is a solitary place, but it is named after the Virgin Mary, Our Lady of Solitude, not its location. The mission is the 13th in the chain, and there's some speculation as to whether that has caused it to be unlucky. The original church was destroyed by floods in 1828, rebuilt in 1832, and, as you just read, was completely in ruins by 1874. The mission was originally built to assist the other missions in Northern California, since it is located about 40 miles northeast of Mission San Antonio de Padua and about 50 miles southeast of Mission Carmel. The mission as it stands today consists only of the restored chapel and convent wing, which is now a museum. The town of Soledad is named after the mission. When the Spanish arrived in the Salinas Valley, they encountered the Colon people, a subgroup of the Ohlone.
Mission Soledad. Native Archive Room. Some more nice models.
These were the native people who were converted into Catholic neophytes. Inside the museum is this bell. Original to the mission, it would have been rung throughout the day to call the neophytes to their daily tasks. Also in the museum is this All Souls bell, which was rung each evening at 8 p.m. to alert the faithful to pray for the souls of the dead. It would seem Mission Soledad's reputation for being unlucky may be well deserved. In 1814, Spanish governor José Joaquín de Arriaga died here during a visit. He is buried here, at his request, garbed in the habit of a Franciscan priest. Here is another grave of Fray Florencio Ibáñez, who served at the mission for 15 years until his death. He was known for teaching music and his nativity play. He was buried at this spot in the original church, which collapsed in a flood in 1831. Only 3 years before, in 1828, the mission was hit by a different flood and an epidemic that killed many of the Native Americans. Another Franciscan, Father Vicente Francisco de Sarria, died in that epidemic. Many of the neophytes fled the church, and the mission's decline began. Mexico secularized the mission in 1834. After, the mission served as a ranch, a house, a grocery store, and even a restaurant. Governor Pio Pico eventually sold the mission for $800, but it was ultimately abandoned for almost 100 years.
This is the state the missions were in when they were found. Most of them look something like this, and a lot of them have been restored, but Mission Soledad has not been. So this would have been the north wall. There would have been a wall there, which you can't see. That has been restored in the 50s. And then there would have been a wall there. And this would have been the quadrangle with the fountain in the middle. And beautiful view to look at of the mountains. This would have been the south. This would have been the east wing, blacksmith shop. Grist mill is right here. And you can see the wheel there, and further down, other shops. All gone now though, due to floods and all kinds of things going on. But that's what it would have looked like. Even the signs now are looking a little dilapidated.
These plans in the museum show where the buildings were before the floods, with the chapel and convent at the bottom and the grist mill and other dilapidated wings at the top. These photos show its state just before restoration began by the native daughters of the Golden West in 1954.
Mission Soledad.
As with all the California missions, the 14 Stations of the Cross line the walls of the chapel. These are rare originals. The mission was rededicated in 1955. It's a wonderful stop along the El Camino Real, and also a surprisingly good spot for a picnic. And exit through the gift shop. After touring Mission Soledad, we went over the hill and into Monterey, California. It's a beautiful place. We first checked into Carmel by the River RV Park and took a look at our spot. We then went into town for dinner at Luau's, a kind of a tiki-themed restaurant. Mrs. Tiki Envy really enjoyed it. Notice on the red glass they have a location in Santa Cruz too. After a couple of Mai Tais and a walk along the shore, we went back to camp and went to bed. The next morning, we browsed the farmers market at Carmel by the Sea before heading to a big stop on this trip, the Mission in Carmel. Mission San Carlos Borromeo de Carmelo, or Carmel Mission, was founded June 3, 1770, by Father Junipero Serra and was his favorite of all the missions. It is named after St. Charles Borromeo, the 16th century Archbishop of Milan. Before the mission, the Acellan and Rumsen tribes lived where Mission Carmel now stands, but it is hard to find mention or images of them. Unless, of course, you go to the graveyard.
The graveyard at Carmel? 4,000 unmarked Indian graves are supposed to be in here. Like the abalone shells.
Father Serra died at the mission in 1784. He is buried here, and his remains have been exhumed 4 times and removed for examination for sainthood. This stole was taken from his grave by Father Angelo Casanova on January 14, 1882. The right side of the stole is missing because it was cut into small pieces to be given to those in attendance for the public viewing of Father Serra's body. The stole is around Father Serra's neck when he was buried August 29, 1784. The garden at Mission Carmel commemorates the 200th anniversary of Father Serra's death.
All right, Carmel Mission.
Originally, the mission in Carmel was made of adobe, but Father Lawson built a stone one to replace it for Father Serra's last wish in 1797. Father Lawson is also buried at Carmel Mission. Mission Carmel was the center of activity for Father Serra and the headquarters of the mission system from 1770 to 1803. As a result, the mission holds many artifacts. Father Serra oversaw the planning of each mission from Carmel and established 9 of California's 21 missions.
There's the pipe organ in Carmel. What a pair of Serras. Could play you some party music. Christ the King.
This stole was worn by Father Serra in the 1770s.
Father Junipero Serra's cell. Carmel Mission. Not much to see.
Father Serra's austere lifestyle while living at Mission Carmel did not follow him into death. Mission Carmel is home to the Father Serra Memorial Cenotaph. A cenotaph is a monument to a person buried elsewhere. At Mission Carmel, that elsewhere is only a few feet away near the church's altar. The Serra cenotaph is made from locally quarried travertine marble and bronze. A life-size statue of Father Serra lies on top. His bare feet are resting on a grizzly bear cub as a symbol of California. This panel depicts Father Serra accompanying Captain de Portola and a squadron of leather jacket soldiers. Below are neophytes and natives. At the head of the cenotaph is Father Juan Crespi praying over Father Serra. Father Lawson is at his feet with his arms crossed, and Father Julian Lopez, a friar at Mission Carmel who was only 35 when he died, also kneels. All 4 Spanish priests are buried under the church sanctuary. Each of these men were important to the California missions. Their treatment and death is a far cry from the mass graves for the native peoples we just saw outside. Father Serra founded the mission system. Father Crespi named the Santa Clara River Valley and accompanied Captain Gaspar de Portola when he discovered San Francisco Bay in 1769. And Father Lawson established the San Fernando Mission and many others. Carmel Mission is the site of California's first library, which had 30 books. Along with the rest, Carmel Mission was secularized by the Mexican government in 1834. The mission fell into disrepair and the land was sold. It was abandoned for 30 years with no roof. Ancient graffiti from that time can still be found on the mission's walls. By 1850, the mission was in ruins. President Abraham Lincoln played a key role in the return of the California missions to the Catholic Church, and in 1886, ownership was transferred to the Franciscans of the Diocese of Monterey. Restoration began in 1884, and the mission was made a minor basilica by Pope John XXIII in 1960. Father Serra was beatified by Pope John Paul II in 1988. He was canonized as a saint of the Catholic Church by Pope Francis in 2015. Today, Mission Carmel is one of the most popular and visited of all the missions, and rightly so. It was the seat of power during its day and boasts a museum filled with California history. Don't forget to exit through the gift shop.